I'm here to recruit men to support gender equality.
Well, I can only applaud that you try to get men active in gender equality. After all, this is what the MRA movement is all about. But I have the feeling that your current audience doesn't recognize this. Considering that what I think are mostly women in your audience, I assume so, I can't see the faces, I have the slight feeling that they might not realize that if men were to be equal to women and women to be equal to men will gain and women will lose. Considering that most laws are protecting women, do not so for men. And men, on average, die a little bit more often than women. And I say a little bit, and obviously that's just because I try to be nice, because it's a lot.
Wait, what? What do men have to do with gender equality? Gender equality is about women, right?
And with that one sentence, you put the finger on the reason why it's difficult for MRAs to get men behind them when they talk about equality, because there are a lot of men who seem to think that equality movements are indeed about women. And there are still men believing that they have more rights than women. God knows why, but yeah, there's still men out there that do think like that. You're one of them, aren't you?
I mean, the word women, the word gender is about women.
See, when you talk like that, it makes me seriously doubt why they made this a TED talk and not a TEDx talk. Because women is only half of the story when you talk about gender. Obviously, men being the other half.
Actually, I'm even here speaking as a middle-class white man. Now, I wasn't always a middle-class white man.
I'm going to go on a limb here and going to guess that you used to be a middle-class white boy, yes?
It all happened for me about 30 years ago when I was in graduate school. And a bunch of us graduate students got together one day, and we said, you know, there's an explosion of writing and thinking in feminist theory, but there's no courses yet. So we did what graduate students typically do in a situation like that.
Go out, have a party, and get drunk?
We said, okay, let's have a study group. We'll read a text, we'll talk about it, we'll have a potluck dinner.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not in a million years I would have come up with that one. So, sorry. Well, I'm glad to see I'm not the only one who never would have guessed it.
So every week, 11 women and me got together.
Seems that we're in the vicinity of royalty, though, because wouldn't that then make you, well, at least one of the, but perhaps even the first white knight? Well done.
We would read some text in feminist theory and have a conversation about it. And during one of our conversations, I witnessed an interaction that changed my life forever. It was a conversation between two women. One of the women was white and one was black. And the white woman said, this is going to sound very anachronistic now, the white woman said, all women face the same oppression as women. All women are similarly situated in patriarchy, and therefore, all women have a kind of intuitive solidarity or sisterhood. And the black woman said, I'm not so sure. Let me ask you a question. So the black woman says to the white woman, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, what do you see? And the white woman said, I see a woman. And the black woman said, you see, that's the problem for me. Because when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, she said, I see a black woman. To me, race is visible. But to you, race is invisible. You don't see it. And then she said something really startling. She said, that's how privilege works. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. It is a luxury, I will say, to the white people sitting in this room, not to have to think about race every split second of our lives. Privilege is invisible to those who have it.
Wow. And you were there at the birth of intersectionality. What an amazing life you must have led. Though the thing I kind of get out of it is that the black woman sees herself as black and already kind of puts a meaning on that word. And maybe this was true back when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, I don't know. But I think the people now mostly claiming that they are black and therefore they have it worse are the people that try to make black an issue. And kind of this is what they're doing. Yeah, no, you can't feel oppressed by the patriarchy because you're not black enough. I'm a woman and I'm black, so I'm oppressed way more than you are. This is, by the way, also, it's not only the start of intersectionality, but this is then also the start of blaming the victim card. Wow, you must have been there at the start.
Now remember, I was the only man in this group. So when I witnessed this, I went, oh no.
Yeah, and I guess you scrambled to hide the knives because shit just got ugly in there, right?
And somebody said, well, what was that reaction? And I said, well, when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, I see a human being. I'm kind of the generic person. You know, I'm a middle-class white man. I have no race, no class, no gender. I'm universally generalizable.
Well, I guess that's a good way to go to. It's kind of a bit of a cop-out, but yeah, okay. And you know what? You are a human being. As, by the way, is the black woman and the white woman, but they don't see themselves like that. Does this then mean that the way they perceive themselves is more part of the problem than what's actually happening in the world? I mean, I could absolutely believe in that, agree with that, but is that what you're trying to say here?
So I like to think that was the moment I became a middle-class white man. That class and race and gender were not about other people, they were about me. I had to start thinking about them, and it had been privileged that it kept it invisible to me for so long.
So up until that moment, you were a humanist because you saw yourself as a human, not as a white man or a pink unicorn or whatever. You were a human, but because someone else defined you as privileged and white and therefore the patriarchy or part of the problem, you had to redefine yourself as what they see as a negative so you can change being a negative. But you weren't a negative before that. I mean, you were someone, as you said yourself. I didn't see myself as an oppressive white man. I saw myself as a human, just like I saw the women as human. But now I see myself as a middle-class white man. Oh my God, where does the guilt start and when does it ever stop?
Now, I wish I could tell you the story ends 30 years ago in that little discussion group. But I was reminded of it quite recently at my university where I teach. I have a colleague, and she and I both teach the sociology of gender course on alternate semesters. So she gives a guest lecture for me when I teach. I give a guest lecture for her when she teaches. So I walk into her class to give a guest lecture, about 300 students in the room. And as I walk in, one of the students looks up and says, "Oh, finally, an objective opinion." All that semester, whenever my colleague opened her mouth, what my students saw was a woman. I mean, if you were to say to my students, there is structural inequality based on gender in the United States, they'd say, well, of course you'd say that. You're a woman. You're biased. When I say it, they go, wow, is that interesting? Is that going to be on the test? How do you spell structural?
You know, I'm not quite sure if you realize this, but what you just told me is that your colleague is a shit teacher. Because when she brings class, she brings it in a way that her students don't take her serious. Now, considering the subject, I'm willing to believe that they won't take you serious either. But that being said, I mean, you expect people to sit in a study class and they want to train for whatever and they're doing gender studies. Again, whatever. They sit there because they want to be educated, so they already have a bias toward the subject. If then a teacher cannot fulfill that bias, that's weird because they're already on your hand. So yeah, I'm sorry, mate. What you're telling me is that she's a shit teacher.
So I hope you all can see this is what objectivity looks like.
Nah, I wouldn't call you objective, mate. Maybe you're a better teacher, a better storyteller for sure, but objective? No.
Disembodied Western rationality.
Well, white male privilege obviously only exists in white Western society. I mean, there is no white privilege in Asia, any of the Arab countries, or any of the African countries. And I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist a lot of it in Latin America or European countries that are not white. Well, then again, they are white nowadays because Hispanics are now considered white as well. But yeah, still, I mean, that's not half of the world, so there's a lot of places in the world where there is no white privilege. Is white privilege then real, or is it perceived? Now, personally, I think white privilege is the biggest bullshit out there, but that's just me. I mean, in the country where I live, we don't have people living on the street, or not a lot anyway, they're not visible. But out of most of the people living on the street in Western society are also white. So where is their white privilege?
And that, by the way, is why I think men so often wear ties. Because if you are going to embody disembodied Western rationality, you need a signifier. And what could be a better signifier of disembodied Western rationality than a garment that at one end is a noose and the other end points to the genitals?
Well, you do know your audience. They're laughing at the joke that kind of describes the situation that men are in. They're men, and therefore they have a noose around their neck. Yeah, too bad, really.
That is mind-body dualism right there. So, making gender visible to men is the first step to engaging men to support gender equality.
No, you are rather wrong in that one. Making gender visible is not the first step in equality. Hell, feminists still talk about equality as if it is something they need to gain on men, where in reality they have most laws protecting them. I mean, compare all the laws women have protecting them to all the men have protecting them. Women have the right of choosing whether they will become a mother. The only choice a man has in this situation is whether he has sex or not. I mean, if he has sex, then he can expect to become father, even if he took precautions. Women, however, no. If they get pregnant, they can choose to abort. I stand behind the choice they have. I don't mind, but women have that choice. Men, not so much. When a man and a woman divorce, usually the settlements go in favor of the women. When a man commits murder, he's sent to prison for a very long time, which is just. When a woman commits murder, not so much. There are way more examples than I'm willing to just mention here because I want to make it light and funny and whatnot. But you are very disingenuous. And when I look at your audience now, I do see that there are a few men in there. But on average, you're preaching to the choir, aren't you? Most of them are women. And I would not be surprised if most of them are feminists. And yeah, they love the story about how men are the fault of everything, and how men need to change, and how men are the protagonist in this story. Don't forget, however, that the phrase women and children first existed well before feminism existed. Throughout history, men did the dying to protect the women and the offspring. And somehow, somewhere, we lost sight of that. But men still seem to do the dying. But now, they're idiots. Look at them. Oh, look at that macho man. Oh, look at that misogynistic pig. As long as he dies for us, though, no one gives a fuck. But they're not worth it. And you're propagating this. You are, well, an Uncle Tom, perhaps?
Now, when men first hear about gender equality, when they first start thinking about it, they often think, many men think, well, that's right, that's fair, that's just, that's the ethical imperative.
It's too bad that you keep thinking that the feminist version of equality actually is equality. But you are right. Most men do think like that. They will say, well, gender equality, that's fair, that's reasonable, we should do that. This is why the MRAs exist. Because they are fighting for gender equality. Now, what feminism does, and what most women rights advocates, because let's not all call them feminists, what they do is they try to get more rights. Because, hey, all men are privileged anyway, right?
But not all men. Some men think the lightning bolt goes off and they go, oh my God, yes, gender equality, and they will immediately begin to mansplain to you your oppression. They see supporting gender equality something akin to the cavalry, like, thanks very much for bringing this to our attention, ladies, we'll take it from here. This results in a syndrome that I like to call premature self-congratulation.
Yeah, you always have people that fall head over heels into any indoctrination that comes their way. And then they actually think that they can be part of the indoctrination. And they can explain to women who realize the truth that women are the oppressed class. And oh, they're going to make things better. Even though most women realize, what the fuck are you on about, idiot? But no, those white knights, yeah, I'm not really sure why you're making fun of them, because those are the men feminism needs. Not equality, by the way. Equality don't need men like that. But feminism? Hell yeah. Otherwise, there will be no men helping feminism out.
There's another group, though, that actively resists gender equality, that sees gender equality as something that is detrimental to men. I was on a TV talk show opposite 4 white men. This is the beginning of the book I wrote, Angry White Men. These were 4 angry white men who believed that they, white men in America, were the victims of reverse discrimination in the workplace.
Well, I know the example you're going to talk about in a moment, and I'll mention something about that as well. But first, I have to admit that it seems that they are right. They are being discriminated against. It's called affirmative action. And I'm sorry, but discriminating to help someone is still discrimination. So they are right in saying that they're being discriminated against. Whether it's justified or not, that's a whole complete story. But you can't deny that they're not being discriminated against, even though you keep trying to.
And they all told stories about how they were qualified for jobs, qualified for promotions. They didn't get them. They were really angry. And the reason I'm telling you this is I want you to hear the title of this particular show. It was a quote from one of the men. And the quote was, "A black woman stole my job." And they all told their stories, qualified for jobs, qualified for promotions, didn't get it, really angry. And then it was my turn to speak. And I said, I have just one question for you guys. And it's about the title of the show. A black woman stole my job. Actually, it's about one word in the title. I want to know about the word my. Where did you get the idea it was your job? Why isn't the title of the show A Black Woman Got the Job or A Black Woman Got a Job? Because without confronting men's sense of entitlement, I don't think we'll ever understand why so many men resist gender equality.
Now, if men are not getting the job because of affirmative action, that does mean they're being discriminated against. I'm standing by that point. But at the same time, you do make a valid point. If I'm going for a job and someone else is going for a job and that someone else get it, even if it is because of affirmative action, it never was my job. It's only my job once I've gotten it. So on that point, I agree with you. But then you start talking about how those men will never go for egalitarianism and they will not see women as equal because they do not see how privileged they are and they feel they should stay privileged. And then you lost me again because those are two different things. I mean, they are still right about affirmative action. But the job he went for went to a woman or a minority or a whatnot because it went to a minority or a whatnot. That doesn't mean he's wrong. That doesn't mean it wasn't affirmative action. That doesn't mean he got discriminated against. But it also doesn't mean that it was his job to begin with.
Look, we think this is a level playing field. So any policy that tilts it even a little bit, we think, oh my God, water's rushing uphill. It's reverse discrimination against us.
Yeah, that's a nice hand you got there, mate. And I know you try to display the incline everyone else has to fight to become equal with white men. But you know, the thing is, it's not true. Yes, there are situations where women are struggling to get the same jobs men do. But on average, men work more hours. So there's a reason they are struggling. So I'm sorry. This is glass ceiling story all over again.
So let me be very clear. White men in Europe and the United States are the beneficiaries of the single greatest affirmative action program in the history of the world. It is called the history of the world.
No, it's called working hard, or otherwise there won't be food on the table for your wife and your children. It's also called go to war to protect your country so that the women and children can grow up safe other than being destroyed by another war. It also is called by letting women and children in the lifeboats when the ship sinks, and if there's room, a few men can come along as well, but otherwise they die. Men have been expendable throughout history. Women, however, have not. So I'm not really sure where you're taking your story from, mate, but you're following the female narrative pretty strongly. I'm pretty sure the white knight in you is very powerful. He's also filled with, well, bullshit. Sorry.
So now I've established some of the obstacles to engaging men, but why should we support gender equality? Of course, it's fair, it's right, and it's just. But more than that, gender equality is also in our interest as men. If you listen to what men say about what they want in their lives, gender equality is actually a way for us to get the lives we want to live.
Yeah, gender equality is something a lot of men want to have. I mean, when a man and a woman get divorced, settlements are now, as I said earlier, in favor of the woman. Children stay with the woman, and a father, well, if he's lucky, he can keep in touch with his kids, but if the woman doesn't want it, he can't. There are jobs men take which come with risks, and men die, as I said earlier, a lot more often on the job than women do. If there is a war going on, men can get drafted. Women cannot. You want me to continue on this equality thing? Because there are plenty more examples. If a man and a woman walk on the street in any city in the Western world and the man starts attacking the woman, people will stop him. If a man and a woman walk on the street in any city in the Western world and the woman starts attacking the man, people will laugh at the man. You want me to continue about equality? Bullshit, mate. Seriously.
Gender equality is good for countries. It turns out, according to most studies, it turns out that those countries that are the most gender equal are also the countries that score highest on the happiness scale. And that's not just because they're all in Europe. Even within Europe, those countries that are more gender equal also have the highest levels of happiness. It is also good for companies. Research by Catalyst and others has shown conclusively that the more gender equal companies are, the better it is for workers, the happier their labor force is. They have lower job turnover, they have lower levels of attrition, they have an easier time recruiting, they have higher rates of retention, higher job satisfaction, higher rates of productivity. So the question that I'm often asked in companies is, boy, this gender equality thing, that's really going to be expensive, huh? And I say, oh no. In fact, what you have to start calculating is how much gender inequality is already costing you. It is extremely expensive. So it is good for business.
I think the first thing I'm going to say on this one is, because I can debunk it again and I can give proof, but this time I'm going to do it the other way around. Citation needed, please. Prove what you're saying. Show me those reports. And trust me, I have read rather a few, and I have not found any report that says anything like you're describing. It comes off to me that you're equating things that have nothing to do with each other. Because which European country do you think is more gender equal? Please, let me know. And on which way do you think companies benefit for gender equality? And that they do, companies, yeah, I'm willing to believe that. I mean, people tend to work better in an environment where they feel more at ease, and men don't care whether their boss is a man or a woman, and well, maybe women do, I don't know. So, but yeah, citation needed, please, because whether I can believe it or not, most of it still seems far-fetched. And, well, you said you read the reports, then let us know which reports those were, please.
And the other thing is, it's good for men. It is good for the kind of lives we want to live. Because young men, especially, have changed enormously. And they want to have lives that are animated by terrific relationships with their children. They expect their partners, their spouses, their wives to work outside the home and be just as committed to their careers as they are.
Yeah, unfortunately, research did also show that women, if they out-earn their husband, are more likely to leave their husband. So they're a little bit contradictory. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of stories of women who out-earn their husband and stay with their husband, and there are also plenty of stories where it doesn't happen. But to say it's an automatic win situation for men and women, I'm not too sure about that. Especially because even if women go out and have jobs just like men do and earn for the family just like men do, etc., 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 and I know I'm using just like men do, but as equals, then still the position of a man is not equal to that of a woman, because a woman still has more rights and still has more protections by law than a man does. So when are we going to address those things?
I was talking, give you an illustration of this change. Some of you may remember this. When I was a lot younger, I remember there was a riddle that was posed to us, and some of you may wince to remember this riddle. This riddle went something like this. A man and his son are driving on the freeway, and they're in a terrible accident, and the father is killed. And the son is brought to the hospital emergency room. And as they're bringing the son into the hospital emergency room attending physician sees the boy and says, "Oh, I can't treat him. That's my son." How is this possible? We were flummoxed by this. We could not figure this out. Well, I decided to do a little experiment with my 16-year-old son. He had a bunch of his friends hanging out at the house watching a game on TV recently. So I decided I would pose this riddle to them just to gauge the level of change. Well, 16-year-old boys, they immediately turned to me and said, "It's his mom," right? No problem, just like that. Except for my son who said, "Well, he could have two dads."
Well, there are certain things you can take out of this story. For one, your son is living in a different time, so maybe that's why he picked up on the nuances faster than you did. But then again, I'm not 100% sure how old you are, but I don't estimate you to be 15 years older than I am. So we're roughly in the same ballpark, maybe one generation. But I still remember having heard that, well, you heard it as a joke, I heard it as, well, basically a test. I studied social science as well, and the test was to recognize how people think and how easy it is to fall for assumptions. The funny thing is that with this example, the teacher was sure everyone would fall for the assumption, just like you did. Oh, they were flabbergasted. Oh, nobody knew how. Oh, how is it possible? But when we got this one, none of us in the class had to think longer than 10 seconds to answer it. And just to make sure that you realize, we answered it on paper. So we didn't even hear each other's answer. So I'm sorry, then maybe you came from a generation where women physicians were, for whatever stupid reason, an exception. I know I live in Europe, so maybe that's the difference. But for my generation, it already wasn't an exception. And I can understand that for the current generation, it's, well, normal. Well, especially considering there are more females going to universities than males. So maybe it's going to be the future, that women are more likely to have doctor's position than males because they can't be asked to go for that anymore because they're going to be ridiculed anyway and neglected.
That's an indicator of how things have changed. Younger men today expect to be able to balance work and family. They want dual career couples. They want to be able to balance work and family with their partners. They want to be involved fathers.
Yeah, this is again something, maybe in America this is new, but this is something that I've seen happen in Europe for the longest time. But I'm still not 100% sure what this has to do with equality. And in all fairness, there's a second reason why most modern families have both a man and a woman working. It's an economic necessity. So maybe that's the reason why. Yeah, I think it is.
Now, it turns out that the more egalitarian our relationships, the happier both partners are. Data from psychologists and sociologists are quite persuasive here. I think we have the persuasive numbers, the data, to prove to men that gender equality is not a zero-sum game, but a win-win. Here's what the data show. Now, when men begin the process of engaging with balancing work and family, we often have two phrases that we use to describe what we do. We pitch in and we help out. And I'm going to propose something a little bit more radical. One word: share. Because here's what the data show. When men share housework and childcare, their children do better in school. Their children have lower rates of absenteeism, higher rates of achievement. They are less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. They are less likely to see a child psychiatrist. They are less likely to be put on medication. So when men share housework and childcare, their children are happier and healthier. And men want this. When men share housework and childcare, their wives are happier. Well, duh. Not only that, their wives are healthier. Their wives are less likely to see a therapist, less likely to be diagnosed with depression, less likely to be put on medication, more likely to go to the gym. Report higher levels of marital satisfaction. So when men share housework and childcare, their wives are happier and healthier. And men certainly want this as well. When men share housework and childcare, the men are healthier. They smoke less, drink less, take recreational drugs less often. They are less likely to go to the ER, but more likely to go to a doctor for routine screenings. They are less likely to see a therapist, less likely to be diagnosed with depression, less likely to be taking prescription medication. So when men share housework and childcare, the men are happier and healthier. And who wouldn't want that?
Okay, the first thing I'm going to say, citation needed, because I do know a few researchers that show what you're telling, but they can't prove correlation. And if there is no correlation, then it's just an accident or whatever. The ADHD and Ritalin problems our youth faces now is because ADHD has become a term to describe kids being rowdy and being busy and being energetic, and we have a problem with that. Mostly boys, by the way. Have you ever noticed? Mostly boys. And yes, in a family where they have more contact with their father, they have more options to expel their excess energy. This is because male bodies are built differently. We deal with energy differently than females do. Unfortunately, in a lot of households, when a kid is, well, busy, active, this is becoming a problem, especially in single parent households or households where kids don't have a lot of room to vent their energy. And because of that, they often get diagnosed with ADHD, which in, well, a lot of cases, and I won't give a number because I can't find the official number, but what I see in my work, roughly 60 to 70% are falsely diagnosed. So, yeah, the medication gets them quiet, all right. Yeah, that's one way of dealing with kids. That's a way to educate the future of our world. And you're propagating it. I'm sorry, mate. Again, this is pretty much a fail. But yeah, I know. I mean, if a man can stay at home and spend more time with his family, yeah, of course he's going to be more happy about it. And yeah, I really believe that women have more time to do other stuff because they don't have to do the housework as much. But it becomes a problem when a man has to go out to work 8 hours a day and then come home to work another 4. See, that's also not quite fair, now is it? But let's not mention that, shall we? And women, especially when there are children, women don't work full-time jobs when the husbands work full-time jobs. They simply don't, because someone has to be home with the kids, and I can totally agree with that. But it hardly ever happens that woman will go do the full-time job and the man will stay home with the kids. Why is it that that hardly happens? Are we talking about equality again? Because it's often men that have to do the work, and at the same time you're telling them they don't have to do the work. But if they don't, then there's going to be an income problem in the family because there won't be any income. And that in itself is also a problem, isn't it? Wow. In my little train of thoughts, I seem to have poked a few holes in yours. I'm sorry.
And finally, when men share housework and childcare, they have more sex. Now, of these 4 fascinating findings, which one do you think Men's Health magazine put on its cover? Housework makes her horny. Not when she does it. Now, I will say, just to remind the men in the audience, these data were collected over a really long period of time, so I don't want listeners to say, okay, I think I'll do the dishes tonight. These data were collected over a really long period of time. But I think it shows something important. That when Men's Health magazine put it on their cover, they also called it, you'll love this, chore play. So, what we found is something really important, that gender equality is in the interest of countries, of companies, and of men, and their children, and their partners. That gender equality is not a zero-sum game, it's not a win-lose, it is a win-win for everyone.
So then my first question still remains, well, maybe not remains, but still. My first question would be, then why are you not advocating for gender equality? Because feminism doesn't go for gender equality. I mean, feminism created a situation where they feel they are entitled to more rights because men always had those rights, even though men never had those rights to begin with. And you're clearly pushing that narrative, yet you keep using the term gender equality. But feminism isn't about equality. The women movement isn't about equality. The laws protecting women protect women, not men. There are some laws that protect all of us, but there are more laws written to protect women than there are men. Again, a man committing a murder, he's going to go away for a long time. A woman committing murder, she might actually get excused, whether there is an excuse or not. Stop calling it gender equality. It's not.
And what we also know is we cannot fully empower women and girls unless we engage boys and men. We know this. And my position is that men need the very things that women have identified that they need to live the lives they say they want to live in order to live the lives that we say we want to live. In 1915, on the eve of one of the great suffrage demonstrations down Fifth Avenue in New York City, a writer in New York wrote an article in a magazine. And the title of the article was Feminism for Men. And this was the first line of that article. Feminism will make it possible for the first time for men to be free. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't know if that is the first line of that article. I'm more than willing to believe it is, though, because, yeah, so a newspaper said something. Fair enough. What we do know about feminism, though, is that they've never done anything for men. I mean, even the suffragettes fought in America for the right to vote in a time when not every man had a right to vote. And when the suffragettes, more or less were asked what should come first, the right for minorities to vote or the right for women to vote, they had a resounding who cares about the minorities attitude. And yes, this is something I can easily point towards, but I can ask quotations and I can ask for citation. You can ask the same from me. If you want them, I will have them. Do I believe in equality of men and women? Well, I believe it would be a good thing if we have it. On this, I have no quarrel with you whatsoever. The problem is, though, and this is something I have mentioned a few times, it's not women that are the weaker of the two sides in this. Women have more rights, more protections, and basically are seen as more admirable in society. Don't forget that well before feminism ever existed, the phrase women and children first was already embedded in our society. So the few things that men might have had are gone. And please don't start about the glass ceiling. And yeah, but men have it so much better because they own most of the wealth and they own most of the world. Yeah, I don't want to be rude, mate. Those are not men. Those are a faction. A small fraction of men are rich and wealthy and independent and whatnot. Most men aren't that. And don't start about white privilege or male privilege because men die roughly between, what is it, 7 to 9 times as often as women on the job. Suicide is mostly a male problem. When a war is being fought, males are sent to the front. And there are more examples. I know. I mentioned a few of them before. And I also noticed that this movie is taking a lot longer than I thought. I mean, yeah, I probably will make a shorter version of this. But, mate, seriously, I understand that you want to white knight for feminism. And if you really believe in equality, and I misinterpreted your story so far as trying to white knight for feminism instead of actually going for equality, then I apologize. I really do. But I don't hear you talk about equality. I hear you talk about how men need to hand in so that there would be equality for women. But men have nothing left to hand in. There are no more things, there are no more rights, there are no more privileges that men, whether they ever had them, remains to be seen, that men might have had, I doubt it, but even if it were true, they no longer have them. Universities now on average have more female students than male students. Okay, most of them don't go into STEM research, but still. So women under a certain age earn more per hour than men under a certain age. The wage gap has so thoroughly been debunked and disproven time and time again, but still being brought up that even the President of the United States claims that it's true, even though feminist economists claim it's bogus. It's been debunked so very often, and yet still it becomes part of the narrative. I'm sorry, I have no love for feminism. It's a segregatory movement, it's a hate movement. But okay, maybe you actually mean that you really want egalitarianism, that you really want men and women to be equals. If that is true, then I'd love to see your next piece on how you think men need to be helped when there are domestic violence situations and men have nowhere to go. Because men are victims in domestic violence as well. Maybe women are more victims, even though there have been reports writing about how women are often the perpetrator. But, well, women can start the fight, but men can finish it. But there are also men who do not fight back when their women attack them, but there are no shelters for them. So maybe the next thing you do is talk about that and show that you really are about equalitarianism and people being equal, and you looking into the mirror and seeing a human and being a humanist before you are a feminist. Maybe you will do all those things, and then I will stand corrected. Till that time, though, I'm sorry, mate, but if you said what I think you said, it's bullshit.